solution. They and you know, you have to make the argument that in action, it doesn't need to be that far of a stretch from something that we already are doing, and you start incrementally and then you keep pushing the envelope of we could be doing better, we could be doing more, but you need to get people on board somehow at the very beginning. And we had, you're right, we had the luxury of having a mayor who was, you know, very vocal and very committed to this plan. And we committed to Vision Zero by executive order, which is different from doing it by resolution or ordinance, for example, because an executive order essentially directs all of the departments of the administration to work on this thing. It is a directive that, you know, cannot be ignored. A resolution can be a little weaker. It's sort of like we have the goal of doing this, but we don't really know any concrete steps of how we're going to make this happen. And so if a community doesn't have the ability to do that through a mayor or through a council, then it's important to be able to figure out which argument is going to work for which decision makers, because in Vision Zero, there really is something for everyone. And that's another thing that I've learned. You know, I used to have people very early on just very explicitly say to me, sorry, but you know, the fatalities that are happening on the street are just not as much of a priority as the fact that people can't find parking when they come home at night who live on the street. And I would be appalled. I couldn't fathom the fact that someone would say those words out loud about a human life, you know, that was lost as a result of a traffic crash. And over time, I've had to learn that the initial reaction to those things and the position that you're in, whether you're an advocate or whether you're someone working in municipal government or whether you're an elected official, really matters, because it's a long game of getting people on board. There's a lot of you learning yourself. There's a lot of you teaching the people who don't already know how to think about, you know, this topic, how to talk about this topic. There's a lot of that happens, and you'll see now that a lot of our electeds over the years, because they've been constantly exposed to us and our team, you know, and the advocates talking about these projects and making the terminology and how we think about it more familiar to them, you will hear our representatives also talking about Vision Zero in a really responsible way. But that wasn't always the case in the beginning. It had to happen over many years. So you kind of have to take the time to understand what is going to appeal to which group of people and try to tailor it that way, and not let the worry that you are compromising on the message stop you from doing that. Because if you're someone who really cares about this, you will not compromise on the message. You are on the right track. You have the goal of getting support for this, and getting the support looks different with different audiences.
Great, thank you, Barkha. We have a couple questions, a few actually, and let's start with Peter Krummer.
Great, thanks. So Barkha, you talked about so many things you're doing. Maybe, you know, in this line of work, tell us something, a lesson learned from, and you sort of alluded to this in your just discussion, something that didn't work or unanticipated problem, like the uptick in fatalities, and you know what you learned from that and how you responded. Thanks.
Sure. One thing that I think about often is when we created our Vision Zero plan, we're following a lot of the best practices that are suggested by the Vision Zero Network and just other cities who have gone through this process. And it was really important to me for us to get the equity component right in our Vision Zero action plan. We are a very, very diverse city, and in many ways ethnically diverse, but there's also a lot of diversity in, you know, the communities themselves, where the minority populations are located, how that overlaps with what we identify as communities of concern that have a lot of environmental injustices historically that have happened. So it was really important to me to capture all of those things in our Vision Zero action plan, so that when we actually started doing the work, we could focus on the areas that really needed it the most. And you know, if anyone takes a look at our Vision Zero plan, you'll find that there's a little bit of discussion on equity, but it isn't as great as it could be. And there are several reasons for that. When we did a community of concern analysis in the first round, essentially 80% of our entire city was covered and identified as a community of concern because of the different demographics and the distribution of the factors. And so we tried to drill down even more, and we got to a plan that I think is okay, not perfect. And when we started actually doing the work, so we did the Vision Zero action plan, and then it was time to actually implement projects, redesign the streets, focus on engineering and design, reimagine what these dangerous corridors could be, with a focus specifically on pedestrians and cyclists who are the most vulnerable users of our streets, and we're not unique in that. What we found is that after having done all of those analyses, we couldn't start with the implementation in those areas that were identified as the priority community of concern areas for various reasons. And that was something that was, you know, it was definitely a learning opportunity for me. It was something that I didn't expect, and it's something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So when you go through a Vision Zero process, the plan is one thing, and then when you get to implementation, there's so many other factors that govern where you can actually put these projects in place. So the first protected bikeway project that we implemented in Jersey City was in downtown Jersey City, right in front of City Hall on Grove Street. Grove Street was one of our high injury streets, but by no means, you know, the most dangerous. There are many other corridors in the city that are much, much more dangerous for pedestrians and for cyclists that I would have thought, you know, that's where we would have started. But that's not the reality of how implementation actually happens. And in order to be able to do work that is very new and very different for a majority of our city, we had to start in a place where there was already some built-in demand, where, you know, there wasn't going to be a parking offset because that would have killed the project and we never would have been able to get it off the ground. Where it was a low-hanging fruit project where we could essentially just take some leftover street space that was available and shift around where the vehicles went, where the bike lanes went, where the parking went, and we were able to create a protected bike lane from the existing right-of-way width without losing any parking, without losing any travel lanes. And so, you know, in my mind, at the time, it didn't really make sense for us to start there because that's not where the highest need was. But now, you know, I understand more clearly why starting in those places and building up the momentum for something new that you're doing and getting a whole community behind a project that ends up being successful is really important to be able to then go to the streets that really, really need it, that are going to be a more difficult conversation, and then point to the success and say, you know, we have results that show that there used to be crashes on this street, there aren't anymore because of us redesigning this corridor. Let us now do it here. We are showing to you proof that this is, you know, this is a worthwhile change and something that will be impactful. So that is a lesson that I keep having to learn of, you know, where it seems like something should be happening, or what it seems to me should be happening versus what we can actually implement on the ground, and where those improvements go.
Thank you. Thank you. Adam has a question I think a lot of us have. Adam?
Hi, thank you for being here. My coworker Leah put a question in the chat, but he signed in as me accidentally as well, so had my name. But I do have a couple questions, but I'm going to try and keep it short because I know other people have questions as well. But I guess my first question would be, how would you try to apply what Jersey City has done to cities that are much smaller and like much more suburban than Jersey City are?
Yeah, do you mean what Jersey City has done in terms of the Vision Zero work specifically, or something else?
I guess like I guess besides like Vision Zero, like a lot of people like understand it, but like just don't know what to do. But like the common complaint that a lot of people like to say is like, oh, we're not New York City, we're not Jersey City, like we can't do things like that. And I just think that's, very short-sighted and absurd.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a question that, I get asked a lot, we get asked a lot. When we were starting this work, a lot of people would say that here in Jersey City, we're not New York City, we're not Portland, we're not Amsterdam. It doesn't make sense to do those things here, these things aren't gonna work here. There's definitely an element of you have to have the leadership in place that is sort of going to put those things to the side and do the thing anyway. That is very, very important. And when you don't have that, I understand how difficult that can be. Because you feel like you're sort of spinning your wheels advocating for something without having the willpower at the very top of the municipality to be able to do that thing actually. And one thing that I've seen that people have some success with, I see this in Montclair a lot actually, is so you definitely have to start with a very temporary installation of something. You have to just try a thing. Even if you're not trying something on the street itself, like we started by testing out curb extensions to make crossing safer for pedestrians. And we did that on, in our street network. However, when we were gearing up for that, we were getting a lot of pushback from our emergency services teams, our fire department, police department, other emergency services, because they thought that it would impact their operations and affect their response times. And so for a while, we were looking at a possibility of not being able to do this at all on the streets. And so we had to pivot and say, okay, if we can't do it on the streets, let's just test out the radius of a curb extension in our municipal parking lot where a fire truck can drive around it just as a test, doesn't have to be out on the street, just to get them comfortable with this change that was going to happen. And if they were willing to do that, maybe one day they'd be willing to do that on the street. So if you need to start incrementally like that, in a very low stakes, way, I think that's fine. But I can't, emphasize enough how important the disruption is, because once the disruption happens and there's discomfort about something happening that people don't really agree with, but then people see that the world didn't fall apart because we put up a bike lane on a street, and there are actually a lot of people who are using it and may not be saying anything about it, it really does change things. So you can start small. You can also start by implementing changes in a way where it's not exactly a traffic safety improvement, or it's not, a Vision Zero thing. It can just be a community enhancement thing. I've seen a lot of communities have success with starting to do like murals in the streets under, their like cultural affairs or whatever it's called in your community, like those processes for a street fair or for some sort of community enhancement. And that has then snowballed into, we can actually take this same type of approach or this same type of exercise and turn it into a pedestrian plaza or turn it into a public space, whatever that ends up being. That's how our Newark Avenue pedestrian plaza was formed. There was no intention at the very beginning for that to be a pedestrian plaza. It was just, there are some businesses here, it's a natural terminus of this street. It seems like we should close it off every once in a while and have a street festival. And then that turned into, maybe it should be a pedestrian only space. So the projects don't always have to start with a transportation lens, as long as the transportation safety, element is a common thread that's running through the projects. I think that is also effective.
Thank you, Barkha, and thank you, Adam, for that question. Patrick.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Barkha, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks for all the work that you continue to do in Jersey City. I miss it. I miss being there. But what you said earlier about having other people, where like if Mayor Phillip's not there anymore or you're not there anymore, there's other people that would carry on the work, because it becomes part of the whole thinking process, within the city. I think that's huge, really, really important. And it kind of reminds me of like how they've started to redesign all cities in the Netherlands, where it becomes part of the actual process. It's not like just from one person or a couple of people. It becomes part of the whole, the way of thinking and the way of redesigning. And the other thing I just wanted to say real quick is, where I live now in Maine, we don't have the heavy traffic, that Jersey City has. So it's like we don't really have that many injuries and fatalities. There's not as many car crashes and things like that. So those kind of problems aren't here. But I'm working with a group that's a climate action task force, and using that here in Biddeford, Maine, as a means to say, one of the things we need to do is improve, walking and bikeability in this town, because the climate action task force has determined that the most of the greenhouse gases being produced around here is from the transportation sector, and most of that is coming from cars and trucks on our streets. So it's just another kind of tool you can use, I think, to say, hey, there's if we don't have, if safety on our streets isn't really the biggest issue, there's other issues that we can look at as well to try to make things better for people walking and cycling. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
You said that so much better than what I was trying to say earlier. Thank you, Patrick. That's exactly what I think, is that, there's an argument to be made for this Vision Zero work from lots of different lenses, and climate action is one of them. Just beautification of a community or neighborhood is one of them. And so whatever works, or whatever it seems like your community seems to have more of an emphasis on, is the one to go after. And to your first point, I think the longer that I am here in the city and in this role, the more important it is for me that the city has healthy habits towards this work moving forward. And I think the fact that we've been doing a lot of these things incrementally points to that. And it is also really important because it's not sustainable also for people, whether it's, community advocacy groups or advocates within city government, to continue to fight these battles for years and years and years. There's a very real, burnout and emotional and mental toll that this work takes on everyone who's involved in advocating for it, because you can see that it's the right thing. You can see, how clear it is that this needs to be prioritized. And you will constantly be met with, either people or policies or whatever it is who are not in agreement. And so we also need to get our cities to a point where the work isn't reliant on advocates inside and outside constantly pushing for it and constantly fighting for it and constantly having to show up at these critical moments when projects are in danger of slipping and we need to keep them on track, because it's just not sustainable. It's not, healthy in a lot of ways for everyone who's involved. And so my goal is also to try as much as we can here in Jersey City to get things to a point where these are just almost like a given. Like the city will always prioritize active mobility, or will always invest in transit. We'll always do whatever we can to make those modes of transportation as efficient and as appealing and as comfortable as possible for people. So that's something that often isn't said. It's something that Deb and I were talking about recently, and deserves a lot of recognition, because the mental and emotional labor is immense. And it is not sustainable for that to be the only thing that determines whether this work happens or not. And it's our goal within city government to ensure that, projects aren't entirely reliant on that in order to move forward.
Huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, and I may not be pronouncing it right, but Erlea?
Yes, Erlea, you said it right. Okay, awesome.
Great. Long time no see.
Long time no see. I saw you yesterday. Okay, cool. So my question, I wrote under Adam's name by accident in the chat. It's basically, how did you address community pushback, especially for infrastructure like bike lanes? Like, I know Jersey City has miles of bike lanes, especially protected bike lanes. But whenever we end up asking, hey, we would like to implement bike lanes, people complain about car parking, or they'll complain like, oh, it's dangerous, it's a major street. So how do you deal with that? How do you approach that?
Okay, so here's what we did. The first bike lane that we ever installed, which is the one I was talking about a few minutes ago, was right outside of City Hall. And that was a really, symbolic move for us. We sort of wanted like the seat of government to be the place where the first bike lane was going, as a message of like, we're committed to this, we're making this change, it's important. And for that one, there was pushback, there was a lot of pushback, but not as much as we would have had in other communities, because in that case, like I was saying earlier, the street was wide enough where we could have put in a protected bike lane without parking loss, without travel lane reductions or any of those things. So there was pushback because it was a new thing and people didn't know, how it would work. And there was now all of a sudden a floating parking lane, and everyone was, very concerned about it, wrote a lot of emails and made a lot of calls. But very quickly, people started to see like, this doesn't actually impact my daily operations. I can still drive on the street, I can still park here, but now people can also bike here. So that ended up working. The next project that we did, we had a lot of pushback on, because it was a major change to the street. We were reducing a travel lane, we were getting rid of a turn lane, there was some impact to parking, and I will be honest, that was a very, very traumatic time. The way we dealt with that was that we had to get our data on point. We had to get our facts straight. So we were advancing this project because there had been several crashes, several fatalities of those crashes on this stretch of the street. And so we had to show that the changes we were making were a proven countermeasure to improve safety of all users of the street. That argument didn't work because people just questioned the data and said, you're making this up. Then we did traffic counts. That argument didn't work either. People said, well, yeah, you're saying all these cyclists are on the street, but I don't see any of them, so you're lying. We did countless community meetings. So unfortunately, if you get to the point where you can actually implement something and you're having pushback as a result of the implementation, you really will just have to ride out a very, very difficult period of time. And in those moments is when it's most important for you or whoever your other champions are in your organization to be steadfast and to stick by the change and give it time, and not to fall back and say, there are too many complaints, we have to reverse this. Like, that's really important. And we had the ability where the mayor stood by the project and never said we were going to reverse it. So that helped. But if you're getting pushback and even getting started, like you can't even do the implementation because you can't get public support to even make the change, that is where the pop-ups or the demonstration projects are key. Where if you can get approval, knowing that you will have resistance in the community, if you can get approval for a couple of days, for even one day, for a few hours to implement a change and to get it and to test it out, that will be then your starting point to do more and more over time. And the way you talk about it is, you don't call it a permanent bike lane and you don't call it a temporary bike lane, because the words will upset different groups of people. If you say temporary and people really want it to stay, like they're not going to be happy with that. So it's a semi-permanent change that you're making, and you're making it to test out this concept to see if it works or not. If it works, great, you will iterate and try to do it again for a longer period of time. If it doesn't work, you'll go back and, you know, fix the design and try to improve it next time around. But the demonstration projects or the pop-ups really, really are key. And we actually had, when we did ours on Bergen Avenue, we had Clarence from Street Films do a video on it, which is, I think, a really good guide, actually, if you want to replicate it in your community. So we can either share that with everyone who's on here today, or you know, I'll put it on my website. But that's a good guide to starting up your own pilot project. And we did it for just a period of 2 days, and then we took it all away.
Great.
Which is sometimes frustrating because you're putting in as much work into a pilot project as you would be for, you know, a permanent installation. But it's important to sort of go through those motions for the community and get them comfortable, especially in communities where you know, bike lanes and these types of improvements can be very triggering projects for certain communities, because they're associated with a lot of other changes like displacement and like gentrification that, you know, have a lot of importance to certain communities. And so you want to be careful, even though those are probably the areas where people are disproportionately, you know, experiencing traffic crashes and fatalities. You don't want to go into that community and impose a project on them. There has to be a slow growth in those areas of you just being present, you always being available, and you always being willing to start small and keep iterating. That's something that we're learning here in Jersey City, because even after all these years, you said we have so many miles of bike lanes, and I probably had a reaction because I don't think it's enough. We need a lot more, but we still haven't been able to do any in the southern part of our city, in Greenville. We have one, but it's on the edge. It doesn't go through neighborhoods. And, you know, I'm also having to learn to not get discouraged by that. It's very easy to get discouraged, and just to make sure that we are constantly showing up for the community who wasn't ready several years ago. Maybe they're still not ready. It's just going to take some time, but you know that they deserve that improvement. Oh, Paul, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Barkha, I just want to sneak a question in from Nathan, which is related, and maybe you just answered, and that is, which gap in the protected bike lane network are you most excited to close? And we'll get to you, Chris.
Your favorite child, Ollie. You know, right now I really am focused on Communipaw, so that would be great if we could do an east-west connection for Communipaw. But besides, I mean, there are so many, but I'll go with Communipaw for now.
Thank you. Chris.
Hi there. I'm Chris Adair. I'm just in the neighboring town in Hoboken. And so I also want to say thank you to Barkha, because we have kind of used some of the things that Jersey City has done to point to here in Hoboken and say, hey, but look what they've done. So I would also suggest that that is a technique that you can use when there's competition in the cities, and some people that might appeal to certain people. Hey, well, they're doing this. Don't we want to, you know, best them here or do that kind of thing? I also wanted to just comment on what you said about using proper verbiage and how certain things can be triggering to people is so true. And one of the suggestions that's kind of worked here is referring to bike lanes as multi-use lanes. And truly they are, right? So people with disabilities can use them in wheelchairs. It's not just about people on bicycles. And so if you can be more inclusive with the language there, I think that that also can get some people on your side. I just wanted to add that, but thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So I just want to thank Patrick for putting in the link in the chat for the street film. I think, Gary, you'd asked how did Clarence help out? Well, he made that little film, so that's in there if you want to save that for later on. That's great. We're coming down the wire. We have a few more minutes so we can get some more questions in. And Will had kind of asked a little bit about the what you were referring to, the fatigue, or maybe the fatigue of activism and constantly being out there and getting worn down when it's not built into the process, and how it's important that we are still, once we get a piece of infrastructure, we don't sit back on our laurels and, you know, not keep pressing for more. Can you speak to the efforts needed by your advocates out there in town, even when you make some gains?
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to have our advocates be sort of a compass for us to see where we're getting complacent and where we need to be pushing more and constantly doing better. That's really, you know, that's really my favorite way of engaging with our advocacy community. I am very mindful of not asking too much of the type of support where, like, you know, this project's in danger, we need you to come out and like really talk about it to make sure it happens. I really try to limit how much I do that, because I'm mindful of the fact that, you know, they are out there every single day doing the work, doing the advocacy, whether they're doing it in a formal way by showing up to a meeting or in their own way, you know, sharing their personal views, having conversations with their neighbors, getting into, you know, really difficult interactions when they're just traveling on the street, going about their day. All of that is advocacy. It really is, no matter how it's happening. So I really try not to, you know, add on to that by asking for those things. Though it is important, and we always really appreciate it, because so many of our projects really have happened because we've had such strong and vocal and very organized, very strategic support from our advocacy communities. They really are just so effective, so intelligent. They take the time to educate themselves on the issues and be the experts in the room, and often help us say things that we can't say, that I can't say as a public official, you know, in a meeting. And so all of those things are very, very appreciated. And then outside of that, I always like to check in to see either where our blind spots are, you know, just things that we're not seeing, how things are translating to the community, and also where we could be doing better, because we don't ever want to fall into the trap of, you know, we're building bike lanes and we've built so many, so we'll just keep doing that and do it exactly the same way and never try to improve our process. Or, you know, this is our bread and butter. We're doing curb extensions and you know, a bikeway or the public spaces or whatever, and then that's all we stick to. My goal is to always do more and always try to keep improving. And the advocates are great for that, because they always have an eye on what other cities are doing, what is working elsewhere, what they're seeing in their travels, and we don't always have that, you know, that same perspective. And I think it's really valuable. So I think that if you, in your communities, if you have municipal employees who seem like they are your supporters and they want to be a champion of this stuff inside, these are ways that an advocate can support them, both by showing up and writing the emails to the electeds and showing their support and saying, you know, coming out for the projects that are maybe in danger, but then also giving support in this way of, it's not you know, criticism of you're not doing enough. It's more like, here's what we're seeing that could be great for the city. How can we work together to make this happen? I think that's when we work the best with Bike JC and with Safe Streets, and with, you know, now we have Hudson County advocacy group, even with Bike Hoboken. So yeah, I think we've all taken the time to really build great relationships with each other that really, you know, it really shows when the projects go into place. And I think for others, I do want to just quickly say, I often hear, and I'm hearing a lot on this call, just how do we get started, whether it's with Vision Zero work or individual projects. So I had mentioned to Deb, and I'll say here for everyone on the call, I in the next couple of weeks, we'll be putting out a resource, which is just a couple of documents. One for what the essentials of Vision Zero are, if you aren't a Vision Zero community, how to get started, how to figure out what your goals should be, how to develop the high injury network, what things you need consultants for versus what things you don't need consultants for, that you can just do yourself. So that's one thing. And then another thing is just a template of a document that any community can replicate that I'll just put out there to create a Vision Zero plan. Because, you know, I know that getting started is often the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. And so, you know, if there's anything that I can do or that we can do to support communities to help them get started, happy to do that. So it'll be available, you know, if not in the next couple of weeks, then in the month, and it'll just be a free downloadable few documents.
Super, thank you very much. Well, we're coming down to the end here, and I am happy to see at least one more costumed participant here. Thank you, John. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, good. People are coming on camera.
Polly.
Very good. All right. We got Polly. Kate, I was going to be a traffic cone also. That was my other idea. So thank you so much, Barkha. Deborah, would you like to close this out?
Yeah, so thank you for those who did costumes. We're going to honor all three of you with a special prize, and I'll be in touch with you to try to get that to you. Thank you for playing along today. Barkha, thank you so much. This was really enlightening for me, I think, and for a lot of people on this call. We don't always get a chance to talk about the process, the mistakes, the fact that this is a long game, and some of the strategies by appealing to different interests within the community, whether it's climate change or health, and sort of how to start with incremental pieces. I thought that was really important for us all to hear. We're all kind of struggling to get started. So we're all going to give you a big applause for the Barkha Vision Zero documents. Very excited about seeing that. I am personally very excited about seeing that. And thank you for being so generous in sharing your experience and putting together that document. We will, we're happy to amplify the existence of the document to all of our members. So let me know as soon as that's out. This
Okay,
is,
will do. I did just put the link in the chat, so it'll be available there. I'll send it directly to you
right.
as well, Deb.
Yeah, with a little description, and we'll
sounds good.
Shoot it out there to everybody. That's great. A quick apology from me. I started recording halfway through. It was on pause, so my apologies. We will put up the partial webinar on our website for people to see, which was mainly the question and answer part. But I apologize for missing the beginning piece from you, Barkha.
And Deborah, just to put out there that we'll be meeting again on the 29th.
Yep.
29th of November.
So this form is part of our Safe Network initiative, with a real focus on having advocates being able to have a community and talk about the way that we're working on Vision Zero, the way that we're approaching safe streets. And the last sort of meeting for the year for the Safe Network, we want to focus on really having a conversation about how we can work together as advocates. And again, Barkha, thank you for putting an emphasis on the role that advocates play. In a lot of places, advocates are initiating these, not just supporting efforts that are happening in their municipalities, but really are the front line for any of these initiatives. So we're going to have a meeting November 29th at noon. It was in our newsletter. If you're not on our newsletter, please go to our website and sign up. And that meeting will be really to talk about how we can leverage our community to work together and what campaigns and what initiatives and what we need, what people need to help them do this work. And one more quick thing, I really appreciate the recognition of morale for all of us that you also talked about. This is hard work and it takes a really long time and there's a lot of struggles and bumps along the way. So having that perspective and vision to keep going and that we have a community of support, I think is really important. So I hope all of you will come on the 29th. And once again, Barkha, thank you. Everybody go to the Complete Streets Summit and watch Barkha and Jersey City get the award. Thank you again for everybody for your participation and your time today. Feel free to email us any further questions. I'll share those with Barkha if we didn't get to them today. And also any of your suggestions and comments to the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition about how we should be continuing to do our work. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Awesome.
Have fun on Halloween, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Barkha.
Barkha, is there a way we can reach out to you later? Sorry.
Yes, you can email me. Do you want me to say my email or put it in the chat?
Put it in chat if you can. That'd be
Okay,
easy.
got it.
Yeah, the chat. Thank you.
I'm staying on for 1 minute, Barkha. If
I
you
love
have
your Northern Lights background. I was trying to do like a fireplace background behind me, but I couldn't figure it out.
It's okay.
they have the perpetual fire, on
Yule log.
video. Yeah.
Also, I came up with a more punny title, which it should have been curbside chat, which is so much more appropriate.
Oh, curbside
right.
chat would have been good.
All right. Well, we'll use that. We'll use that the next time we do one of these. I love that.
Okay.
I love that. In fact, we were talking about these. So we've been doing like monthly sessions, right?
Yeah.
Different focus. And we were talking about trying to go between a more presentation-y kind of and a more discussion. So we could actually, Paul, name the discussion part the curbside chat.
Here we go.
I love that idea. That's cool. Very fun. Great. Well, thank you. This was really terrific.
Thank you, Deb. I wanted to just thank you more at the end before everyone signed off. But I mean, really, like, we're all here because of you. You're such a great connector of all of these pieces in the state. And there's so much of this that you set the tone for that we all just now know the path to walk on. And you deserve a lot of credit for that. And I'm so excited for you to be on the county's Vision Zero group and just, everything else that's coming up. But you really have been so instrumental in all of this work.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind and generous, and only because we have a really great community to learn from.
Yeah.
I came into this not as a transportational professional, and I really rely on this community, to learn from and to help show us where we should be going. So I really appreciate the community and really appreciate your leadership. I mean, the fact that Jersey City has had such success and has been such a great model for the rest of the state, you cannot measure the importance of that, I think, for our work going forward. It's really critical. So
A rising tide raises all ships.
Yes.
the work that you're doing is just so critical for us for the rest of the state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.